Hi, my dear friends. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from. We hope you enjoy the story. I was standing at the entrance of our 9-story apartment building, a heavy bag in one hand and a light blue baby carrier with little Matthew in the other. My legs were shaking, not from exhaustion after 4 sleepless days and nights at the maternity ward, but from fear. A real, primal fear that froze every muscle in my body. Because the old woman in a worn-out dark gray coat with frayed sleeves, who seemed to appear straight out of the thick autumn fog, like a ghost materializing from thin air, grabbed my sleeve with her bony, powerful fingers and hissed right into my face, her breath smelling of some kind of herb. "Don't you dare go in there. Do you hear me, girl? Call your father right now. Immediately. Do it." I tried to pull my arm free, instinctively pressing my baby closer to my chest, shielding him with my body. The woman wasn't like the usual old ladies who sat on benches gossiping about neighbors. Her eyes were piercing, almost black, no trace of the cloudy dullness of age, burning with a strange inner fire, with the kind of understanding ordinary people don't have. Her dark blue, almost purple scarf was tied low, pulled tightly down to her graying eyebrows, covering half her forehead. Deep wrinkles, like cracks in dried earth, lined her face. Her skin was ashen, but her hands were strong and unyielding. I could feel it in my bones when she grabbed me. There was no breaking free. We had plenty of fortune-tellers and street psychics in our neighborhood, especially in the fall. They gathered near the subway station, spreading out cards on folding tables, calling to passers-by to come learn their fate, love, money, destiny, for 10 or 15 bucks. They loved to scare new mothers with wild predictions about curses or misfortunes, then offer a cleansing for an extra fee. "Please, leave me alone," I whispered, glancing around desperately, hoping to see at least one neighbor, one living soul. But the courtyard was completely, eerily empty. It was as if everyone had vanished into thin air. The October wind whistled, driving yellow and brown leaves across the wet asphalt, swirling them into little whirlwinds and slamming them against the building walls. Somewhere in the distance, on a rooftop, a crow cawed, long and harsh, like an omen. It was 4:30. Still daylight, but the sun had already slipped behind the clouds, and the whole yard sank into a gray haze, a tense twilight. No one around, not a soul, like the world itself had stopped breathing. The playground was deserted, the sandbox flooded with rainwater, the swings creaking slightly in the wind. Windows in the neighboring buildings were dark. Usually at this hour, grandmothers would be out with their grandkids, kids coming home from after-school programs, someone heading back from work. Now, nothing. Just the wind howling and that crow's mournful cry. My husband was supposed to pick me up from the hospital. He'd sworn he would, 2 days ago when he came to visit, bringing a huge bag of apples, bananas, juice, chocolate, and baby clothes, tiny onesies, booties, and socks. He'd kissed me, gazed at our sleeping son with such tenderness, such awe. He took a dozen photos from different angles, sent them to his parents and friends. Told me how proud he was, how our boy was perfect, how lucky he felt. He promised to come for us on discharge day, to order a big cab so we'd be comfortable and safe, to bring roses for me and blue balloons for the apartment. But this morning, as I was packing my things, excitedly waiting, he called and cut me off flat, a sudden business trip to Chicago. A huge client, a $100,000 deal, the boss insisting he fly out immediately. Flight at 2 p.m. He'd be gone for a week, maybe less if negotiations went well. He apologized, said he was devastated, that he'd dreamed of bringing us home, but work is work, and we have a mortgage, and babies aren't cheap. I was so hurt I burst into tears right there in the hospital bed, face buried in the pillow so the other mothers wouldn't see. The nurse, Patricia, a kind woman in her 50s, stroked my back, whispering that it was just the hormones, that all new moms cry like that it would pass. She gave me valerian drops, told me not to stress, reminded me that the baby feels everything I feel. But the pain cut deep. How could he? A business trip, today of all days? The day our son came home for the first time? I'd imagined it so many times. Andrew gently carrying Matthew in his arms, the neighbors congratulating us, the apartment decorated with balloons, me laying our son into the crib we'd picked out together. It was supposed to be perfect. Instead, I was alone. Exhausted beyond words, dragging a heavy 8-kilo bag stuffed with diapers, baby blankets, tiny clothes, bottles, creams, powder, plus my nearly 4-kilo newborn. The driver, a quiet man around 40, didn't even offer to help. He stopped the car, waited as I wrestled the bag from the trunk, and drove off without a word. Listen to me carefully, girl. The old woman tightened her grip. Her fingers pressed into my sleeve like iron claws. Your father is alive. Do you hear me? He's alive. Call him. Right now. Use his old number, the one still saved in your phone. I froze inside, like ice water had filled my veins. My vision blurred. My father had died 8 years ago, March 23, 2017. I remembered that date better than my own birthday. A massive heart attack, the doctor said. No chance of survival. It happened so fast we didn't even get him to the hospital. Right there on the living room couch while watching the Chicago Bears game. Mom was cooking dinner. I was in my room studying for exams. We heard him groan, a terrible, choking sound. Mom ran first and screamed. I rushed in. His face was gray, his lips blue. We called 911, waited what felt like forever. Mom tried CPR, I prayed, begged God not to take him. But when the doctors arrived, they just shook their heads. He's gone. I was a junior in college then, studying elementary education, dreaming of becoming a teacher like my first grade mentor, Mrs. Peterson. After his death, the world went gray. Nothing mattered, classes, plans, the future. I couldn't eat or sleep, couldn't see a reason to keep going. I skipped school for a month, cried every day. Friends came by, professors offered a break. I refused. I knew Dad wouldn't have wanted me to quit. He was my rock, my advisor, my protector. When I was sad, I ran to him. When I was happy, he was the first to know. He worked as an engineer, never made much, but always said, family is what matters. He read to me at night, fairy tales, adventures, sci-fi. Taught me to ride a bike, ran beside me holding the seat until I learned. Walked me to school every day until 5th grade. Helped with math homework I could never figure out. He made everything make sense. Mom never recovered after he died. She aged 10 years in a month. Her hair turned gray almost overnight. Wrinkles carved deep lines around her mouth and eyes. Her back bent, her movements slowed. She still hasn't come back to life, even after 8 years. Lives alone in our old 2-bedroom apartment. Works at the library, comes home, eats in front of the TV, goes to bed early. I call her every day, visit on weekends with groceries, beg her to see friends, go for walks. She just shakes her head and says her life ended with Dad's. Are you kidding me? My voice cracked, tears burning my eyes. My father's been dead for 8 years. 8? Do you understand? What's wrong with you? Leave me alone. I have a newborn, he's going to freeze out here. He's alive, do you hear me? The old woman repeated, her tone unshakable, her eyes blazing with terrifying certainty. Call that old number in your contacts. You didn't delete it, did you? You couldn't. Your heart wouldn't let you. And don't you dare go into that cursed apartment until you've spoken to him. Promise me, girl, don't go in there. Matthew stirred inside the soft blue baby wrap my mother-in-law had given me, letting out a small whimper, sniffling. He was probably hungry, or maybe he just felt my fear. Everyone says babies absorb everything their mothers feel. You can't let yourself panic around a newborn. It leaves marks on their little souls. I stood there, trembling, lost. Was this real? Or some hallucination from exhaustion? I hadn't slept properly in 4 days, only dozed in short bursts between feedings. Labor had been brutal, 12 hours of agony, waves of contractions that made me think I'd die from the pain. They had to stitch me afterward, and the anesthesia barely worked. Even now it hurt to walk, almost impossible to sit. The doctor said it was all normal for a 31-year-old first-time mom. But I felt completely drained, like a lemon squeezed dry. But that strange old woman standing in front of me was completely real, alive, solid, tangible. And the fear in her piercing dark eyes was just as real, raw, and genuine. She didn't look like the typical crazy person you sometimes see near subway stations, the ones who mutter to themselves, wave their arms, and pester strangers with nonsense. No, there was something entirely different about her. Her gaze had a frightening clarity to it, crystal sharp, as if she knew something ordinary people weren't meant to know. I don't understand any of this, I tried to reason, forcing myself to think logically, though my hands were shaking and my knees were about to give out. What number? Why would I call a dead man? You've lost your mind, lady. Please, just leave me alone. There's danger in your apartment, she snapped, glancing sharply toward the building entrance, her eyes darting to the dark 5th-floor windows, ours, number 53. As if someone might be watching us or listening from up there. A great danger. Deadly. Serious. For you, and for your baby boy. If you go in there right now, you'll regret it bitterly. You won't survive it. Call your father, he'll explain everything. He's waiting for your call. But hurry, you don't have much time left. It felt like a jolt of electricity shot through me, from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. Suddenly, I remembered Dad's old cell number, the one I'd known by heart since childhood. After the funeral, about a week later, Mom had said we needed to go to the phone company and cancel it. Why waste money paying every month for a dead person? She'd said. But I begged her not to. Practically got down on my knees. I even offered to cover the cost myself, $5 a month for the most basic plan. Mom didn't understand. She'd just shake her head and tell me it was pointless. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't bear the thought that Dad's number would just stop existing. That if I dialed those familiar digits, I'd hear the number you've reached is no longer in service or just empty tones into nowhere. That number was my last fragile thread connecting me to him, to my dad, to the life we'd had when he was still here. Sometimes, especially on the darkest days, when loneliness and sadness weighed on me, I would dial his number, just to hear those long, drawn-out rings. I'd listen, silently crying as the tears dripped onto my phone. I'd talk to the emptiness, to the silence. Tell him about my problems, share my worries, ask for advice. Pretend he could somehow hear me, somewhere up there, if heaven was even real. I'd tell him about college, my exams, my first job as a teacher, about meeting Andrew, about our small wedding, about my pregnancy. I never told Mom about it. She wouldn't have understood. She'd say I was torturing myself, that I needed to move on, stop clinging to the past. The old woman finally let go of my sleeve, her fingers releasing their iron grip. She took a small step back, giving me space to breathe. "I'll wait right here," she said quietly, softer now but still firm, unwavering. "Go sit on that bench under the maple tree. You look so tired, I can see it in your eyes. Sit down and call. Don't be afraid. Everything will be fine, trust me." I don't know what came over me in that strange moment, why I obeyed a complete stranger. Maybe it was the 4 sleepless nights in the stuffy hospital ward catching up with me. Maybe postpartum hormones were clouding my judgment. Or maybe it was something deeper, an animal instinct, a gut feeling I couldn't explain. I'd always believed in signs, in omens, in dreams that meant something. My grandmother, Mom's mother, had taught me that as a child. She used to say I should always listen to that quiet inner voice, the whisper of the heart in moments that matter. Mom would laugh at us, call us silly and superstitious. But Grandma would just nod and say calmly, "Your time will come, Lucy. One day you'll understand, when life tests you." And right now, something deep inside me was screaming, not in words, but in pure, primal terror, do exactly what that woman says. Don't go inside. Call that number. Now. I slowly walked toward the old chipped green bench under the bare maple tree. Most of its leaves had already fallen. The bench was damp and cold from the recent rain. I wiped it off with my sleeve and carefully sat down, wincing from the pain of the healing stitches. I laid little Matthew on my lap as gently as I could, making sure he was safe and warm in his soft blue baby wrap trimmed with white ribbons. He slept peacefully, breathing quietly, unaware of the nightmare unfolding around us. With stiff, trembling fingers, I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. My hand shook so badly the screen blurred before my eyes. I opened my contacts, scrolled slowly to the letter D, though I already knew exactly where to find it. There it was, Dad, with the tiny square photo I'd taken 5 years ago at our summer barbecue, him smiling ear to ear, holding a glass of lemonade. It had been his birthday, his last one, as it turned out. I had never managed to delete that contact, though I tried many times, my finger hovering over the delete button but never pressing it. For a full minute, maybe more, I just stared at the screen. At that familiar word, Dad. At his smiling face in that tiny frame. This was madness. Absolute insanity. My father had been gone for 8 long years. I'd stood at his funeral, seen his lifeless face, his closed eyes. I'd kissed his cold forehead goodbye, watched as they lowered the casket, thrown a handful of dirt onto the lid. I'd sobbed so violently I nearly passed out, Mom holding me on one side, Uncle Nicholas on the other. The whole family had come. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, his co-workers, college friends. We'd held a memorial dinner at home, everyone crying, sharing stories about him. How could he possibly be alive? How was that even physically possible? But my hand, as if acting on its own, reached out and pressed the green call button beside his name. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, in my throat, everywhere. I closed my eyes and held the phone to my ear. The dial tone began. Long, steady, endless. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4, 5. Of course no one would answer. What was I even expecting? The number must have been disconnected long ago or reassigned to someone else entirely. Maybe some stranger would pick up, confused, ask who I was. Or maybe there'd just be silence, like always. I was about to hang up, ready to cry from exhaustion and disappointment, when, suddenly, on the sixth ring, someone answered. A faint click, static, a rustle. Hello, Nancy? Honey? My dear girl? The voice was hoarse, muffled, crackling through interference, but unmistakable. So familiar it froze my blood. I knew that voice. I'd know it anywhere. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and landed on my lap beside Matthew's soft wrap, nearly sliding onto the wet pavement. I grabbed the cold edge of the bench, holding on for dear life as the ground seemed to fall away beneath me. My ears filled with roaring noise, my vision darkened, gray spots floating before my eyes. I felt dizzy, like the whole world was spinning. I was sure I'd pass out. I snatched the phone back with both trembling hands, clutching it to my ear. Dad? I breathed out. My voice sounded broken, raspy, barely mine. Dad, is that really you? Please, tell me it's you. It's me, sweetheart, it's really me. The voice trembled, full of tears I could almost hear. Oh my God, finally. Thank God you called, my girl. I was so afraid I wouldn't make it in time, that it'd be too late. Nancy, tell me quickly, where are you? Are you home? Are you inside the apartment? I am sitting outside. On the bench, I stammered, struggling to breathe. With Matthew, my son. I just got back from the hospital. But, Dad, how? How is this possible? You're dead. I saw you. At your funeral. You were in the casket. How can you be alive? I'll explain everything later, I promise. He cut me off sharply, his voice suddenly firm, commanding, the way it got only when he was dead serious. Now's not the time, Nancy. Listen to me very carefully, word for word. Do not go inside. Do you understand me? Under no circumstances, no matter what, do not enter that apartment. Leave. Right now. Take your son, take your things, and go as far from that building as you can. Go to a cafe, a shopping mall, a clinic, your friend Olivia's, anywhere. Just not home. Do you hear me? Not home. I looked at our building, our ordinary gray 9-story block built back in 1984, according to the faded plaque by the door. The scratched metal entrance, the graffiti-covered walls, the peeling green mailboxes, the old elevator that broke down every week. Our apartment was on the 5th floor, number 53. Just a small 2-bedroom with low ceilings, windows facing the courtyard and the playground. Andrew and I had bought it 2 years ago with a 30-year mortgage, 6% interest, paying half our salaries every month. We'd done most of the renovation ourselves, beige wallpaper with tiny flowers, fresh paint on the radiators, new laminate floors. Andrew even taught me how to plaster the walls. We'd built that home together, piece by piece, with love. What danger could possibly be inside it? Our walls, our couch, our baby's clothes folded neatly in the dresser. Nancy, sweetheart, please, Dad's voice cracked with desperation. I could hear him breathing hard, gasping for air. Trust me on this, and don't ask questions right now. Just trust your father. I know you're confused, that your mind is spinning, that everything feels upside down, but you have to believe me completely. Do exactly what I say. Leave that place right now. Don't wait even a second. I'm already on my way. Driving to you as fast as I can. I'll be there in 20 minutes, 25 at most. There's traffic on the highway, but I'll find a way around. Go somewhere busy and safe. Don't stay alone. Just 20 minutes, that's all. My father, the man I had truly believed dead and buried for 8 long years, the man I had grieved for, the one I still missed every single day, was going to be here, with me, in 20 minutes. Dad, I don't understand, I whispered, my voice trembling, tears running down my face. How are you alive? Where have you been all these years? Why didn't you call? Mom thinks you're dead. We both did. We buried you. Nancy, please, not now, he said quickly, nervously. I could hear a car engine humming in the background, the sound of tires against asphalt. I'll explain everything when we meet, every last detail. But first, you have to get away from the building. It's a matter of life and death. Yours, and your son's, my grandson's. I froze. Grandson. He knew about Matthew. How? You know about the baby? I breathed. I do, sweetheart. Congratulations, from the bottom of my heart. His voice softened for a second, then turned firm again. I've been keeping an eye on you all this time. I know you married Andrew Harrison 2 years ago. You work at elementary school, no? 117, you live on Park Street, house number 12. I know everything, absolutely everything. But none of that matters now. What matters is that you leave immediately. My head spun. He'd been watching me. For 8 years? He knew where I lived, who I was with, what I did, and never once reached out. Why? But why can't I go inside the apartment? I asked, glancing at the entrance. What's there? Dad, please, just tell me something. He went silent for a moment. I could hear only his heavy breathing, the steady noise of the road. There's an explosive device, he said finally. A homemade bomb. It'll detonate the moment you unlock the door, or maybe when you step inside. I'm not sure of the trigger, but I know for certain it's there. You were supposed to die today, Nancy. You and the baby. I stopped breathing. A bomb. In my apartment. Someone wanted to kill me, and my newborn son. Who? I managed to choke out. Who would want to kill us? Why? Your husband, Dad said. Just 2 words, but they landed like a death sentence. Andrew. He planned everything. The world tilted. I grabbed the edge of the bench with both hands. Matthew stirred in my arms, but I barely noticed. Andrew? My husband? The father of my child? The man I trusted completely, the one I loved? You're lying, I whispered. That's impossible. Andrew would never. He loves me. Nancy, listen to me, Dad interrupted sharply. He has a mistress. Rebecca Miller, 24, works at his company as a sales manager. They've been together for 1.5 years. He's planning to marry her as soon as you're gone. Your life insurance policy is worth $100,000. You signed it yourself 6 months ago, remember? He told you it was standard for mortgage borrowers. I remembered. Andrew had brought home some bank papers, said we needed to sign life insurance forms in case of death or disability, a standard mortgage requirement. I'd signed without reading closely. I trusted him completely. $100,000, Dad continued. Plus, the apartment becomes his. The mortgage is automatically paid off by the insurance company, and he gets rid of the baby he never wanted. A clean slate. Freedom. A new life with his young mistress. Perfect plan, isn't it? No, I shook my head, tears streaming uncontrollably. No. That's insane. He couldn't. He was thrilled when I got pregnant. He bought baby clothes, built the crib, chose the name. He was acting, Nancy, playing a part. You remember he used to do theater in college? Dad's voice softened, full of pity. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I really am. But it's the truth. I double-checked everything. I have proof, photos, recordings. I'll show you when we meet. My mind couldn't process it. Too much, too fast. My father alive. My husband plotting to kill me. A bomb in our home. Insurance. Betrayal. But how do you know about the bomb? I asked, clinging to logic, to something solid. How could you possibly know that? Because I've been working for a special government agency, he said after a pause. I had to fake my death 8 years ago to protect you and your mother. Criminals wanted me dead. I was a witness in a major corruption case involving city officials. I was offered witness protection, but to do that, I had to disappear. Officially. To die. It was the only way to keep you both safe. I listened, stunned, feeling like I'd fallen into a bad movie. A witness. Protection program. Fake death. But his voice was deadly serious, no trace of doubt. The coffin, who was in it, then? I asked quietly. The body of an unidentified man about my age and build, he said. He died in a car crash. No family. His face was badly damaged, hard to identify. They used his body, planted my documents, faked the report. Some officials were bribed to make it look real. Your mom was never told the truth, for her own safety. The less she knew, the better. And you, too. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know what I put you through. Mom. Oh God. Mom had mourned a living man. Destroyed her life grieving for someone who wasn't dead. She has to know, I said firmly. You have to tell her. I will, I promise. But first, we deal with your situation. Nancy, have you left the building yet? He asked, tension in his voice. I looked around. The old woman was still standing near the edge of the courtyard, staring at me without blinking. The entrance was about 50 yards away. Not yet, I admitted. I'm still on the bench. But I'll go now. Just tell me, who is that woman? The fortune teller who stopped me? My colleague, Dad said. Martha Peterson, an agent. I asked her to keep watch near your building this morning, just in case. Good thing I did. She was supposed to intercept you and warn you, which she did. So she wasn't a psychic at all. Just in disguise. Everyone playing a part, it seemed. "Give the phone to Martha," Dad said. "She'll take you somewhere safe." I stood, adjusted Matthew in my arms, grabbed my bag, and walked slowly toward the woman. I handed her the phone. "He wants to talk to you," I said softly. She took it, turned slightly away, speaking quietly and briskly, all business. I stood there, holding my baby, staring at the building, at the windows of the 5th floor. Behind those windows, in our cozy apartment where Andrew and I had spent so many happy evenings, where we'd built our baby's crib and dreamed about the future, there was now a bomb, a device meant to kill me and my newborn son. And my husband, who had sworn to love and protect me for life, was off on his business trip. So he'd have an alibi. So when the explosion happened, he could say, I was out of town. I had no idea. Must have been a gas leak or something. How could he? How could someone sleep beside me, kiss me, talk about love, watch our baby's ultrasound, and plan our deaths? So coldly, so carefully, signing insurance papers, taking a mistress, pretending to be a perfect husband. The woman handed me the phone back. "Your father wants you to go to Daisy's Cafe on the next street," she said in her normal voice now, calm and clear. "It's about a 5-minute walk. I'll take you there. You'll wait for him inside. I've already called the bomb squad and the police. They're on their way. The building will be evaluated and sealed off. Come on, sweetheart." She grabbed my heavy bag, and we walked away from the building. I turned back once, twice. Just an ordinary gray apartment block. My home. My life. All of it, built on lies. We walked silently down the empty street. The October wind whipped through the trees, tearing off the last yellow leaves. Matthew slept in my arms, so small, so warm, so defenseless. My son, only 4 days old. The baby his own father had condemned to die, without even looking into his eyes. "How did you know?" I asked quietly. "About the danger, how did you know to stop me today?" "Your father called an hour ago," she said, holding my bag. "Said he got intel from his source. Today was the day. Your husband scheduled that business trip to line up with your discharge from the hospital. He told me to stop you at all costs, to keep you from entering the apartment. So I pretended to be a psychic. People usually listen to that sort of thing, especially new mothers. You're a bit more open, more sensitive after childbirth. And if I hadn't believed you," I whispered. "I'd have dragged you away if I had to," she said simply. "Doesn't matter how, only that you lived." We reached the cafe, a small, cozy place with yellow curtains on the windows. Inside, it was warm and smelled like coffee and fresh pastries. A few customers sat at tables, chatting quietly. Peaceful. Ordinary. A world where bombs and murderous husbands didn't exist. She led me to a table in the corner, helped me settle with Matthew. "Want something to drink?" she asked gently. "A hot tea, maybe? You look pale." "Tea," I said, nodding. "With sugar, please." She walked to the counter, and I sat there holding my son close, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. But I couldn't. My mind refused to process it. I wanted to wake up and realize it had all been a nightmare, something born of exhaustion and postpartum depression. But Matthew was real, warm, alive. The cafe was real, and the woman bringing me tea was real. So was my father, who was supposed to walk through that door any minute now. My living father, whom I had mourned for 8 years. Ahead of me lay 1,000 questions, a meeting with the police, my husband's arrest, and a new life stripped of the naive trust one once had. But most important of all, Matthew and I were alive. Because of a fortune teller who turned out not to be one, and a ghost of a father who turned out to be my savior. The tea burned my lips, but I drank it greedily, small sips, trying to warm myself from the inside. My hands were still trembling, the cup clinking against the saucer. Matthew slept quietly on my lap, his tiny face calm, his long lashes brushing his cheeks. How could Andrew do it? How could he plan the death of this defenseless little creature, his own son? Martha, the woman, introduced herself. She sat across from me, sipping coffee and occasionally glancing at her phone. "The bomb squad's already there," she said a few minutes later. "The building's cordoned off, residents are being evaluated. Your father will be here in 5 minutes, tops." 5 minutes. I'd see my dad in 5 minutes. Alive. Real. After 8 long years apart. "Tell me," I began hesitantly, "do you know the whole story? Why my father faked his death?" Martha nodded, setting her cup down. "I do. We've worked together for 6 years. Your father's one of the best field agents in the organized crime division. 8 years ago, he accidentally witnessed a deputy mayor taking a massive bribe. He caught it all on video. When he tried to turn the footage over to the prosecutor's office, they found out. He was given two options, stay silent or die. He chose a third. He came to us. She spoke calmly, as if discussing something routine, but my chest tightened with every word. They offered him witness protection, Martha continued. But that meant disappearing completely. Legally. A body, a funeral, documents. They gave him a new name, a new identity. He spent the first 2 years hiding in another city while the investigation was underway. When the arrests were made, he was allowed to return to Springfield under a new identity. That's when he started working for us. All that time he was watching us, I whispered. Me and Mom? Of course, she said. From a distance, carefully, but always watching. Your safety was everything to him. When you got married, he ran a full background check on your husband. Seemed clean at the time. But 6 months ago, things started to change. Andrew began seeing another woman. He rented her an apartment. Your father dug deeper. Turned out Andrew was in serious debt. Online poker. Lost nearly $50,000. Debt collectors were threatening him. So he came up with a way out, get rid of his wife, collect the insurance, keep the apartment, and start over with his young mistress. $50,000 in debt. I had no idea. None. Andrew had never mentioned money problems. He was always cheerful, easygoing, carefree. How could he hide something like that? 2 weeks ago, your father learned about the bomb, Martha went on softly. We have informants in the criminal world. One of them reported that a man named Andrew Harrison had ordered the elimination of his wife. He hired a professional, a former soldier who specializes in these things. The explosive was planted 2 nights ago, while you were still in the hospital. Andrew handed him the keys himself and disabled the alarm system. 2 nights ago. The same night Andrew had visited me at the hospital, brought fruit, kissed me, said he missed me. And then he'd gone home and let a killer into our apartment. The door of the cafe opened, and a man in a dark jacket and jeans stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, short-cropped hair. I recognized him instantly, even though he looked older, thinner, lines etched deep around his eyes. But it was him. Dad. Our eyes met across the cafe. His face twisted with emotion, his lips trembled. He took a step toward me, then another, and then he was running. Nancy, he breathed, his voice breaking. I didn't even have time to stand before he was there, wrapping me in his arms, holding me so tightly I could hardly breathe. He buried his face in my hair, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, he whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. For the pain, for the tears, for those awful 8 years. I had no choice. I had to protect you both. I had to. I hugged him with my free arm, the one not holding Matthew, and cried too. Softly, then harder, like I used to as a child when only Dad could make it better. We stood there for a long moment. People in the cafe were staring, but I didn't care. My father was alive. Real, warm, solid. I could feel his heartbeat, hear his breath. At last he pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. His gaze fell on Matthew, still sleeping peacefully. My grandson, he said, his voice trembling. Can I hold him? Carefully, I handed him the baby. Dad took the bundle in his arms as if it were something sacred, then froze, staring at the tiny face. Matthew, he whispered. You named him after me? I nodded, unable to speak. Yes, I had named my son after my father, after the man I thought was gone forever. Dad pressed the baby to his chest and closed his eyes. Tears streamed down his face. The tough undercover agent who had faked his own death and lived in the shadows for years was crying like a child. Martha quietly stepped aside to give us a moment alone. Matthew Davis, she called softly after a minute. The bomb squad defused the device. It was real, a TNT charge with an electric detonator. Would have gone off when the door opened. Killed anyone within 15 feet. Lucky no neighbors were home. Dad nodded, still looking at his grandson. Thank you, Martha. Are charges being filed? Already done, she said. Attempted murder, terrorism. The investigation team's on site. Andrew Harrison will be arrested at the Chicago station in an hour. His train arrives at 5:45. Our people will be waiting. The man who planted the bombs in custody and confessed. We'll question the mistress next. That was it. The end. My husband would be arrested. My marriage, my home, everything I'd built over the last 2 years, was gone in a single day. Dad handed Matthew back to me, sat beside me, and took my hand. I know this is hard, he said softly. I know you feel betrayed and broken. But you'll get through it, sweetheart. You're strong, like your mother. You'll survive this, and you'll come out even stronger. And Mom, I whispered, when will she know you're alive? He sighed heavily. Tonight. After you give your statement, I'll go to her. I don't know if she'll forgive me, but I'll try. God, I'll try. She will, I said with certainty. She loves you. She always has. She hasn't lived, just existed, without you. Dad squeezed my hand tighter. You'll move in with her for now, until you find a new place. You'll have to leave the apartment. It's still under mortgage, in both your names. There'll be legal procedures, but we'll handle it. I'll help. For now, stay with her. It'll be easier for both of you, and good for the baby. I pictured it, the three of us, Mom, me, and Matthew, living together in her old apartment. Mom smiling for the first time in 8 years, holding her grandson, baking pies, finding purpose again. Dad, I said, looking straight into his eyes, promise me you'll never disappear again, no matter what. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it. I promise, Nancy, never again. We arrived at the police headquarters half an hour later. Dad drove us in an old blue Toyota I didn't recognize. Martha followed in a taxi. On the way, Dad told me about his new life, how he'd learned to live under another name, how strange it was to become someone else, how much he'd missed us every single day. I'm Matthew Roberts now, he said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Been with the agency 6 years. I rent a small apartment on the edge of town. No close friends, too risky. Couldn't let anyone get too near. But the hardest part was watching you and your mom suffer and not being able to reach out, to tell you everything was okay. You saw us? I asked quietly, rocking the sleeping baby. Sometimes, he said, I'd stand across from your school, watch you take your class outside. I was at your wedding too, blended into the crowd, wearing dark glasses. I saw you in your white dress, so happy. Saw your mom crying with joy. My heart was breaking, but I couldn't come closer. I imagined it, Dad standing somewhere in the back, watching my wedding from a distance, hearing me vow my life to Andrew, to the man who had plotted my death. When did you realize Andrew was dangerous? I asked. About 6 months ago. One of our informants heard that a man named Harrison was looking for someone to solve a family problem. I checked. It was your husband. I dug deeper, found the debts, the mistress, the whole plan. 2 weeks ago I confirmed the hit order. Haven't slept since, trying to protect you without blowing my cover. We pulled up to the police building, a gray, 5-story block downtown. Dad helped me out of the car and took the bag. We went through security and up to the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled like government offices, linoleum, tobacco, and something faintly sour. They led us into the investigator's office, a small room with 2 desks, several chairs, and a massive safe against the wall. The investigator was a woman around 45, strict-looking, dressed in a gray suit, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. Detective Sarah Coleman, she introduced herself, shaking my hand. Please, have a seat. I understand how hard this is for you, but we need your statement. The sooner we complete the paperwork, the sooner we can arrest your husband and his accomplices. I sat down on the hard chair, settling Matthew on my lap. Dad stood beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, solid, reassuring. The detective took out a recorder and pressed the button. All right, Nancy Davis, please tell us about your relationship with your husband. When did you meet? How did your relationship develop? I began to tell her everything, how I met Andrew 3 years ago in a cafe where I was celebrating a friend's birthday, how he came over to introduce himself, charming, funny, interesting. He worked as a manager at a construction company and made good money. He courted me beautifully, flowers, dinners, long walks in the park. 6 months later, he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. I was happy. He had never shown any aggression. No conflicts, no arguments? The detective asked. None, I shook my head. We almost never argued. He was calm, agreeable. If something bothered him, he preferred to stay silent. I even thought we were lucky, such a harmonious relationship. Did he ever mention any debts? Never. I didn't know he had money problems. We managed our finances together, combined our paychecks, paid the mortgage, bought groceries, saved for the baby. Everything was transparent, or so I thought. He had a separate account, Martha interjected as she entered the office carrying a folder. Here are the statements. $50,000 lost in a year on online gambling and sports betting. Debt collectors started harassing him 3 months ago, threats, calls, texts. Here, see for yourself. She spread several printed pages on the desk. I read the messages, pay up or you'll regret it. Final warning, we know where you live. How had Andrew hidden this from me? How could he pretend to be the perfect husband while gangsters were breathing down his neck? And the mistress, did you know about her? The detective asked. No, I whispered. Not a clue. Martha laid down a stack of photos. Andrew with a young, slender blonde woman in a tight dress. They were holding hands, kissing on the street, entering an apartment building together. The timestamps covered the last year and a half. The entire time I'd been pregnant, he'd been with her. Rebecca Miller, 24, Martha commented. She works at the same company as your husband. They met at a corporate party. He rented her a studio on Maple Street, $1,000 a month. Bought her gifts, promised to marry her as soon as he sorted things out with you. She knew about the murder plan? A cold shiver ran through me. She knew? That girl knew they were going to kill me, and my newborn, and said nothing? Worse, she was waiting for it, so she could take my place? We arrested her an hour ago, Martha added. She's already confessed. Says Andrew convinced her you and he had fallen out of love long ago, that divorce wasn't possible because of the mortgage and the baby, that this was the only way out. She's an accomplice, the detective said sternly. She'll face full charges. Contracted murder. That's 8 to 20 years. 8 years. The same number of years I thought my father was dead. Strange coincidence. We stayed in the office for over 2 hours. I answered questions, signed statements, looked through documents. Dad didn't leave my side. Matthew woke up, and I fed him. Thankfully, the room was all women, and Dad quietly stepped out. At last, the detective set down her pen. That'll be all for now, Nancy Davis. You can rest. We'll call you later for face-to-face questioning and identification, but not today. Right now, focus on your health and the babies. Matthew, she turned to my father, please take your daughter to her mother. I think there's an important conversation waiting there. Dad nodded. We left the office and went downstairs. It was already getting dark, an early October evening. Streetlights flickered on, windows glowed in the distance. Ready to see your mom? Dad asked as he helped me into the car. I nodded. Ready or not, she had to know the truth. Tonight. We drove across the city to Mom's apartment, the same 2-bedroom where I'd grown up, where my whole childhood lived. Dad was silent, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. I understood. He was terrified to face the woman he had loved his entire life, the one he'd made grieve him for 8 long years. She'll understand, I said softly. When she hears everything, she'll understand, and she'll forgive you. I hope so, sweetheart, he whispered. God, I hope so. We parked by the familiar building and climbed to the 4th floor. Dad stood before the door for a moment, gathering his courage, then pressed the bell. Footsteps inside. Mom's voice. Who is it? Mom, it's me, Nancy, I called. The door opened. Mom stood there in her robe, disheveled, older, but still the same. She saw me with Matthew, and her face lit up with joy. Nancy, you're home already? Let me see my grandson. Then her eyes shifted to Dad, and the world stopped. Mom went pale, grabbed the doorframe for support. Her lips trembled, her eyes widened. Matthew? She breathed. Is it really you? It's me, Lucy, Dad whispered. Forgive me. Please, forgive me for everything. Mom stood there, frozen, staring at him like she was seeing a ghost. Her face drained of color, her lips moved soundlessly. I saw her knees give way, her body swaying. Mom. I rushed forward, catching her under the arm. Dad darted to her other side, and together we guided her inside. I held Matthew close as we followed. The small entryway smelled just like always, lavender and something warm, familiar. Her old coat hung on the rack, her shoes lined neatly on the shelf. Everything so known, so unchanged. We led her to the couch in the living room and helped her sit down. She kept staring at Dad, afraid he might vanish if she blinked. Matthew, she finally whispered hoarsely. How is this possible? I buried you. I saw your coffin, your grave. For 8 years I've gone to the cemetery every week, brought flowers, talked to you. She began to cry, quietly, helplessly, tears dripping onto her clenched hands. Dad knelt in front of her, took her hands in his. Lucy, my love, forgive me, he said, crying openly now. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted you to suffer. But it was the only way to keep you and Nancy safe. The only way. Safe from what? Mom asked through tears. What happened 8 years ago? I deserve to know. Dad sighed deeply, wiped his eyes. I witnessed a crime, he began slowly. A high-ranking official taking a huge bribe. I accidentally caught it all on video. When I tried to hand the evidence over to the authorities, they found out. They offered me money to stay silent, or death if I refused. I chose a third option. I went to the Anti-Corruption Bureau. They offered witness protection, but it required that I die, officially. Mom listened without interrupting, tears rolling down her tired face. They handled everything, Dad continued. Switched the body, staged the funeral, filed all the paperwork. Gave me a new name, new documents. I lived in Detroit for the first 2 years while the case was active. When the suspects were arrested, I was allowed to return to Springfield under a new identity. I started working as an agent. 8 years, Mom whispered. 8 years you were alive while I was dying a little every day. I couldn't eat, sleep, or live. Nothing made sense anymore. I went to work like a machine, came home, and cried until morning. Nancy took care of me like I was sick. And you were alive. She sobbed harder, covering her face with her hands. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know somehow? I would have understood. I would have waited. I couldn't, Dad said, stroking her hands. The less you knew, the safer you were. If they discovered I was alive, they would have come after you, after Nancy. Used you to silence me. I couldn't take that risk. Mom lifted her eyes to him, red, swollen, full of pain. You decided for me, she said quietly but firmly. You didn't ask. You didn't give me a choice. You decided it was better for me to believe you did than to know the truth. How dare you? Dad bowed his head. I know I had no right. I know it was unforgivable. But at the time, it felt like the only way. I thought only of keeping you safe. Silence filled the room, heavy and unbearable. I sat in an armchair, gently rocking Matthew, watching them. Mom sat motionless, staring into space. Dad knelt before her, waiting for her verdict. Finally, Mom spoke, slowly, carefully. 8 years, Matthew. For 8 years I lived in hell, believing I was a widow, carrying grief inside me every single day. I lost interest in everything, my work, my friends, life itself. I held on only for Nancy's sake, so she wouldn't be completely alone. And you were out there somewhere, living, working, breathing. I suffered too, Dad exclaimed. Every day, every minute. I watched you fade, watched Nancy cry, and I couldn't come close, couldn't hold you, couldn't comfort you. It was torture, Lucy. The worst kind of torture. Mom looked at him for a long time, studying his face. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his cheek. Gently, uncertainly, as if making sure he was real. You've aged, she whispered. Your hair's gray now. There are new lines on your face. You've changed too, Dad replied hoarsely. But you're still beautiful, my Lucy. And then, suddenly, Mom threw her arms around him. She held him tight, sobbing into his shoulder, loud and raw, letting 8 years of pain pour out all at once. Dad hugged her back, held her close, kissed the top of her head, whispering soft, soothing words. I turned away, feeling like I was intruding on something sacred. I looked out the window at the city lights, the quiet evening streets, the few people walking below. Matthew slept peacefully in my arms, unaware of the storm of emotions swirling around him. It was 10 minutes before my parents finally pulled away from each other. Mom wiped her face with a handkerchief Dad had taken from his pocket. She still looked exhausted, but there was something new in her eyes, a faint spark of hope. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. How you lived all these years. Where, with whom. I want to know it all. And Dad told her, slowly, in detail, how he was moved to Detroit the day after his funeral, how they put him in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city, gave him a job as a night guard at a warehouse, how he called his handler every evening for updates about the case, and about us, how he suffered, knowing he couldn't write or call. For 2 years I hardly left the apartment except for work, he said. I was terrified someone would recognize me. I grew a beard, lost 40 pounds, wore glasses even though my eyesight was fine, became someone else on the outside. But inside, I was still me, a husband, a father missing his family so much it broke my heart. Mom listened, holding his hand, tears silently running down her face. When the case was closed and everyone involved got convicted, they let me return to Springfield, Dad went on. But under a new identity, Matthew Roberts. They offered me a position in the organized crime division. I said yes. At least I could live in the same city as you, even if I couldn't let you see me. You saw us? Mom asked quietly. Sometimes, he said. I'd stand across the street from the library where you worked, watch you come out after your shift. Make sure you were eating, that you looked okay. I wanted to come to you 1,000 times, but I couldn't. Mom squeezed his hand tighter. I was at Nancy's wedding, Dad added, glancing at me. Standing in the back of the hall, wearing dark glasses and a suit. Watching my little girl walk down the aisle. Watching you, Lucy, crying tears of joy. I wanted so badly to hug you both, but I couldn't. It was unbearable. You were at my wedding? I whispered, my throat tightening. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, he said softly. I dressed to blend in, but I was there. I saw every moment. I heard your vows. Heard you promise to love that. He stopped short, clenching his fists. I'm sorry. I don't want to talk about him right now. Mom looked at me carefully, as if only now realizing that I had come with a baby, and without my husband. Something in her expression shifted. Nancy, where's Andrew? She asked. Why are you here alone with the baby? Is he on a business trip? I exchanged a glance with Dad. It was time to tell her the rest. Mom, I began, nausea rising in my throat. Andrew tried to kill me. Me and Matthew. Today. When I came home from the hospital. Mom froze, not understanding. What are you talking about? Kill you? What do you mean? So Dad and I told her everything. The debts, the mistress, the insurance policy, the bomb in our apartment. As we spoke, her face grew paler and paler. When we finished, she covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh, dear God. Nancy, sweetheart, how are you even alive? Dad saved us, I said simply. He found out about the plot and stopped it. If it weren't for him, we'd be dead. Mom looked at Dad differently now, with gratitude and love. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for protecting our daughter and grandson. Whatever happened between us, you saved their lives. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Dad nodded, speechless with emotion. So what happens now? Mom asked, looking between us. With Andrew? The apartment? You, Nancy? Andrew was arrested at the Chicago station. There'll be an investigation and trial. He'll get at least 15 years for attempted murder. His mistress will go to prison too. As for the apartment, we'll probably have to sell it. It's still under mortgage, so there'll be legal proceedings, but that's manageable. Nancy and the baby will stay with you for now, if you don't mind, until they find a new place. Mom stood and came to me, wrapping her arms around me and Matthew. Of course I don't mind. You're my daughter, and this is my grandson. You'll stay here, both of you. I'll help with the baby, with the house, with everything. And you, Matthew, she turned to Dad. What about you? Are you staying too? Or will you disappear again into your secret life? Dad stood, stepped closer, and pulled us all into one embrace. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. I'll stay, if you'll have me back, Lucy. If you can forgive me for those 8 years. Mom was silent for a long moment, then nodded. I won't forgive you right away, she said honestly. The pain runs too deep. But I'll try. And you'll have to earn my trust again. From the beginning. I will, Dad promised. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. We stood there, all three of us holding each other, having lived through more in one day than most people do in a lifetime. A family broken 8 years ago was finally coming back together. Slowly, painfully, but coming together nonetheless. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange, dreamlike haze, as if I were living in some parallel world where everything familiar felt foreign, and the impossible had become normal. I stayed at Mom's 2-bedroom apartment, the same place I'd spent my childhood, getting used to a new reality. A world where my father was alive, and my husband was gone forever, sitting in a detention center, awaiting trial for trying to kill me and our son. Every morning I woke up on the narrow couch in Mom's living room and, for the first few seconds, didn't know where I was. Why I wasn't in my big bed with the soft mattress, why there was a crib beside me instead of Andrew. Those seconds of confusion were blissful, a brief moment before memory came rushing back. And then it hit me, hard and cruel, like a slap in the face, the bomb, the betrayal, the collapse of everything I'd built. Each time, the realization brought a sharp, physical ache in my chest, as if someone were squeezing my heart in a vice. Dad really did move in with us 3 days after that night. He arrived in his old blue Toyota, bringing the few things he owned from the small rented apartment where he'd been hiding under a false name all these years, just 2 worn suitcases, a work laptop, a few books, and a photo album he'd kept hidden all this time. Family photos, secretly taken before his disappearance. Mom cried when she saw it and hugged him tightly, unable to hold back her emotions. He settled into the small 12-square-foot room that used to be my childhood bedroom, where I'd done homework, dreamed about the future, fallen in love for the first time. He slept on an old folding cot that Mom dug out of storage, made it up neatly with his own bedding, and never once complained about the discomfort, even though I saw how he rubbed his back in the mornings. Every day, Dad woke up first, around 6, before sunrise. I could hear him moving quietly through the apartment, careful not to wake us. He'd make breakfast for everyone: oatmeal, strong tea, toast, and Mom's favorite strawberry jam. By 7, when Mom and I got up, the kitchen smelled like coffee and fresh bread, and the table was already set. He helped me with Matthew as if he'd done it all his life. Changed diapers quickly and skillfully, never flinched at the smell. Rocked the baby for hours, humming the same lullabies he used to sing to me. Bathed him in the little tub, gently supporting his head, speaking to him softly. Matthew would calm down instantly in his grandpa's arms, as if he recognized something familiar in his voice, and those dark little eyes would stare up at him with pure trust that made my heart ache. With Mom, things were cautious at first, like two strangers learning each other all over again. They spoke politely, thanked each other for small things, avoided touch. They were relearning how to coexist after 8 years apart. Mom didn't thaw right away. The wound was too deep, the grief too raw. But day by day, I saw her softening. The way her expression changed when she looked at Dad. Sometimes I caught her watching him, long, searching looks filled with unspoken feelings and questions. She'd watch him reading the paper or playing with Matthew, her eyes a mixture of pain, love, resentment, and hope. The kind of look you give someone you lost and somehow found again, still unsure if they're real. One evening, about 10 days after Dad moved in, I saw them sitting in the kitchen over dinner. And suddenly, Mom reached out and placed her hand over his. Just like that, no reason, no words. She didn't move it until they finished their soup. Dad froze, afraid to break the moment, and I saw the glimmer of tears in his eyes. A week after I'd come home from the hospital, when Matthew was exactly 11 days old, the first preliminary court hearing in Andrew's case took place. I was summoned as the main witness and victim. The summons was delivered by a local officer, handed to me personally. I looked down at the official document, covered in stamps and seals, and felt my whole body tighten with dread. I would have to see him, the man who had tried to kill me, and our child. Dad went with me to court. He took a day off from work, saying there was no way he'd let me face this day alone. All the way to the county courthouse, a gray, old building in the city center, he held my hand, rubbing my fingers gently, telling me everything would be all right, that he was right there, that I'd get through it. Mom stayed home with Matthew. I couldn't take a newborn into a courtroom, and I didn't want him anywhere near this. I saw Andrew for the first time since that cursed business trip to Chicago, since that October day when he'd left me to die. He sat on the defendant's bench in a gray prison jumpsuit that was too big for him, unshaven, with patchy stubble, thinner by at least 20 pounds, deep shadows under his bloodshot eyes. He looked terrible, exhausted, aged, broken. When I entered the courtroom, my father supporting me by the arm, Andrew lifted his head and looked at me. Our eyes met for one brief second, and in his eyes, I saw something that looked like shame, or fear, or maybe regret. I couldn't tell, and I didn't care to. He quickly lowered his gaze, staring at the floor, his fists clenched on his knees. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with gray hair and cold steel blue eyes, read the charges aloud in a clear, emotionless voice. Attempted murder of 2 persons, one of them a minor. Organization of an explosion in a residential building. Large-scale insurance fraud. Conspiracy to commit murder. Each word struck me like a blow to the chest. They were talking about my husband, the man I had lived with for 2 years, the father of my child. I was called to the stand and asked to sign an oath that I would tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. My hand trembled as I signed. I stood behind the podium, my knees shaking. Dad sat in the front row, nodding supportively, his eyes steady on me. The judge asked me to recount the events of that day in detail. I spoke, stumbling often, mixing up words, losing my train of thought, but slowly, haltingly, I managed to tell everything. How I came home from the hospital alone with my newborn son. How my husband had gone on a business trip, leaving me behind. How a strange woman stopped me at the building entrance and told me not to go inside. How I called my father, the man I had believed dead for 8 years. How he answered. How he ordered me to leave immediately. How I learned there was a bomb planted inside my own apartment. Andrew sat there, listening without ever looking up. Not once did he meet my eyes. His shoulders were slumped, his back bent. Next to him sat his lawyer, a skinny, nervous-looking guy in his 30s wearing a wrinkled suit from the public defender's office, fidgeting with papers and pushing his glasses up every few seconds. When I finished my testimony, the lawyer stood and asked permission to question me. "Mrs. Davis," he began softly, "would you say there were conflicts in your marriage? Arguments? Did you perhaps give your husband reason to believe the relationship was falling apart?" I looked at him coldly. "There were no serious conflicts," I said firmly. "We lived a normal life, planned for the future, expected a child. I gave him no reason to think of murder, if that's what you're implying. But you weren't aware of his debts, he pressed on. Isn't it possible he was afraid to tell you? Afraid of your reaction? That's not an excuse for plotting to kill someone. I cut him off. He could have talked to me. We could have worked something out together. Not plant a bomb in the apartment where a newborn baby was supposed to live. The lawyer sat down, silent. The prosecutor, a tall man in his 50s with the posture of a soldier, stood up and began presenting evidence to the court. The messages with the hired killer. $8,000 transferred in parts over 2 weeks for planting the explosive device. The hitman's own testimony. He confessed and described in detail how Andrew had given him the apartment keys, turned off the alarm, and showed him where to place the charge. Recordings of their phone calls, discussing specifics. Insurance documents confirming a policy worth $100,000. Every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin. Andrew sat pale as chalk, silent. His lawyer tried to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming, solid, irrefutable. The judge listened to everyone, reviewed the documents, then announced a 1-hour recess for deliberation with the jury. Dad and I stepped out into the hallway and sat on a wooden bench by the window. I was shaking, even though the air inside was warm and stifling. Hang in there, sweetheart, Dad whispered, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. The hardest part's over. It's almost done. Half an hour later, Andrew's lawyer approached us, the same young man in the wrinkled suit. He looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot. Mrs. Davis, he said quietly, your husband, Andrew Harrison, asked me to tell you he's very sorry. He says he never meant for things to go this far. That he was desperate, pressured by debts, by collectors. That he got lost in it all and didn't know how to get out. I stared at him for a long moment, feeling cold fury rise inside me. Tell my ex-husband, I said slowly, emphasizing each word, that I don't care what he feels. Self-pity is not an excuse for attempted murder. He'll answer for what he's done like a man, or rather, as close to one as he can manage. I don't pity him. He doesn't deserve it. The lawyer nodded and stepped back. Dad squeezed my shoulder approvingly. Good girl, he whispered. That's exactly what you needed to say. An hour later, we were called back in. The judge announced that, given the seriousness of the charges and the completeness of the evidence, the case would proceed under special procedure. The next hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, when the second defendant, Rebecca Miller, Andrew's mistress and accomplice, would be brought in. The second hearing took place exactly 14 days later, in early November, with the first snow blanketing the city in dull gray stillness. Rebecca was there this time, sitting apart from Andrew on another defendant's bench. It was my first time seeing her. A young blonde woman, no older than 24, her long hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing a gray prison jumpsuit. No makeup, pale skin, eyes swollen and red from crying. She looked terrified, lost, like a child who'd made a mistake she couldn't undo. She cried through nearly the entire hearing, quietly, continuously, wiping her face with the sleeve of her jumpsuit. She sobbed when the charges were read, when their messages were displayed, when recordings of her conversations with Andrew were played aloud. Her lawyer, an older woman in a strict Navy suit, tried to argue that Rebecca had been manipulated, that Andrew deceived her, convincing her that I had agreed to a divorce, that there was no love left, that this was just a technical way to free themselves and collect the insurance money, that she had no idea there was a bomb, no understanding of any real murder plot. But the prosecution presented the messages that shattered that story completely. In one of them, dated just 1 day before I was to return home from the hospital, she'd written to Andrew, "Soon it'll all be over, and we'll finally be together, my love. I can't wait. I've already picked out my wedding dress." It was damning, clear, undeniable. She knew. She understood. She was waiting for my death like it was a holiday. As they read that message aloud, nausea flooded through me. That girl, this foolish, infatuated blonde, had been dreaming about her wedding dress while I was supposed to die with my newborn in my arms, planning her wedding for after my funeral, choosing her dress for the celebration that would follow our deaths. Dad, sitting beside me, felt me tense and grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. "Breathe," he whispered. "Breathe. Don't let her see how much she's hurt you." I breathed, counting to 10, clutching his hand so hard my knuckles turned white. The final verdict came at the end of November, when Matthew was exactly 1 month and 3 days old. The hearing lasted nearly 4 hours. They listened to final statements from the defense and prosecution, expert witnesses, and both defendants. Andrew spoke briefly, standing at the podium with his head bowed, his voice low and flat. "I'm guilty. I take full responsibility. I'm sorry for Nancy and for my son, but I can't undo what I've done. Rebecca sobbed uncontrollably, begging for mercy, swearing she hadn't realized how serious it was, that she'd just been blinded by love. The judge listened to them both, left for deliberation, and returned 2 hours later. All rise. Court is in session, the bailiff announced. Everyone stood. The judge entered, adjusted her glasses, and opened the file. By the authority of the people of the United States, she began solemnly, this court finds Andrew Harrison guilty of attempted murder of 2 persons, the organization of an explosion, and large-scale insurance fraud. He is hereby sentenced to 15 years in a federal maximum security prison. I sat there, listening to the verdict, and felt nothing but an eerie, hollow emptiness. No anger, no satisfaction, no relief, just a void where my heart used to be. The man I had loved with all my soul, the one I'd planned a life with, born a child with, was going to prison for 15 long years. And I felt nothing, as if he had died that October day. The court also finds Rebecca Miller guilty on the same counts as an accomplice, the judge continued. She is hereby sentenced to 8 years in a federal medium security prison. Rebecca collapsed onto the bench, wailing. Her lawyer tried to console her, but it was no use. The court further finds Stephen Thompson, the hitman who planted the explosive, guilty of terrorism and attempted murder, the judge went on. He is hereby sentenced to 20 years in a federal high-security prison. That was it. The end. The verdict was in, the criminals punished, justice served. Dad, sitting beside me, wrapped his arm around my shoulders and pulled me close. It's okay, he whispered in my ear. It's normal not to feel anything right now. That's your mind protecting you. It'll fade with time. Other feelings will come later, maybe anger, maybe relief. Or maybe you'll just accept it and let go. What matters is that you and Matthew are alive, safe. That's all that really matters. We walked out of the courthouse into a gray November day. Wet snow was falling, melting as soon as it hit the pavement, turning into dirty slush. I pulled up my collar and shivered. Dad put his arm around me again and held me close. It's over, sweetheart, he said softly. The worst part's behind you. A new life begins now. After court, we drove home, to Mom's apartment, which had now become our shared home, our fortress, our refuge from everything that had happened. Mom was waiting for us with a hot meal, the table set, and a smile, the first real, bright, genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. She met us at the door, hugged us tightly. It's over? She asked quietly, looking into Dad's eyes. It's over, Lucy, he nodded. Justice has been served. The 3 of us sat at the table, eating Mom's soup and cabbage pies, drinking hot tea with raspberry jam. Matthew slept peacefully in his crib, his tiny nose softly whistling. Outside, snow kept falling, covering the city in white, hiding all the dirt and ugliness under a clean blanket. The apartment on Park Street, the same 2-bedroom place where I had dreamed of living happily ever after, raising kids, and growing old with my husband, had to be sold. The bank agreed, considering the extraordinary circumstances, an attempted murder, an arrested co-borrower, and the impossibility of continuing payments. Jennifer, a young mortgage manager who had handled our case from the start, helped prepare all the papers, waived part of the debt, and approved early repayment with no penalties. A young couple with 2 kids bought the apartment. They were kind, warm people who didn't even try to haggle, just accepted the price as it was. The wife walked through the rooms, touched the wallpaper Andrew and I had glued up ourselves, looked at the crib, and I could see the same dream shining in her eyes that I once had. We'll take it, she told her husband firmly. This is our home. I was happy for them. Let them have the life I didn't. Let their family be happy. After paying off the mortgage and fees, nearly $50,000 remained. I put it all away for Matthew, for his education, for his life, so he'd never go without. I opened a savings account in his name, with interest. It was my investment in his future, my way of making up, somehow, for the father he'd never have. I had to take an extended leave from my job at school No. 117, where I taught elementary grades, where I loved my students, and they loved me. It was physically impossible to balance teaching with a newborn. Matthew needed constant care, fed every 3 hours, woke up at night, wanted to be held. Mrs. Peterson, the principal, a kind-hearted woman in her 60s, was understanding. She didn't pressure me to return. Nancy, she said when I came to submit my leave papers, don't worry. Your position's safe. Take a year off, take care of your son, get your strength back. Come back next September. We'll wait. Good teachers like you don't come around often. I burst into tears and hugged her. It felt so good to know there were still kind people in this world, people who understood, who didn't judge. The four of us, if you counted Matthew, lived together in that small 2-bedroom apartment. On weekends, Dad's colleague Martha Peterson would come over, the same woman who had stopped me at the entrance pretending to be a fortune teller. She'd become like family, always bringing treats, playing with Matthew, sharing stories from her police work. We became close friends despite the age gap. She was 48, I was 31. Dad was still working in the organized crime division, going on operations, making arrests. But every evening, unless he was on night duty, he came home. To us. To the family he'd lost and found again. He'd walk in, tired, hang his jacket, kick off his shoes, and the first thing he'd do was pick up Matthew, kiss his chubby cheek, and tell him about his day. Matthew would stare at him seriously, as if understanding every word, and Dad would laugh and say, "He's just like me as a kid, curious about everything." Mom and Dad were slowly growing closer again, carefully, cautiously, step by step rebuilding what 8 years apart had broken. I'd see them in the kitchen at night after I'd put Matthew to bed, drinking tea, talking quietly. I'd hear Mom laugh at one of Dad's jokes, for the first time in years. And I'd see how he looked at her, with such tenderness, such love, that my heart ached. One evening in early December, while thick snow swirled outside, the whole city buried in white, I couldn't sleep. Matthew was fussy, and I rocked him in my arms, humming a lullaby. I sat by the window, watching the snow fall, the dim lights glowing in nearby windows, the world quietly going on, unaware of my private storm. Then I heard voices from the kitchen, soft, muffled. Mom and Dad were talking, thinking I was asleep. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. "Lucy," Dad said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I just want you to know one thing. I never, not for a single second, stopped loving you. Every day, every minute of those 8 horrible years, you were in my heart. You were the reason I kept going. I worked, I risked my life, I hunted criminals, all so you and Nancy could live in a safer world." "I know," Mom whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I understand now. I just need time, Matthew. Time to fully accept that you're really here, that this isn't a dream, not a vision, but real life. That you're alive, flesh and blood. For 8 years, I lived thinking you were buried in a grave. I went there every Saturday, brought flowers, talked to a piece of stone. And all that time, you were alive. It's hard to grasp all at once. Take all the time you need, Lucy," Dad said, his voice shaking. "A year, 2, 10. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll prove my love every single day. I'll earn your trust again, from scratch." I heard the sound of movement, then silence, then a quiet sob from Mom, and Dad's soft, soothing whisper. They were holding each other, crying, letting go of the past, beginning again. I turned away from the door, hugged Matthew tighter, kissed his tiny head. Let them. They'd earned this second chance. As I rocked my son and watched the snow outside, I thought about how strange and unpredictable life could be. How everything you've built over years, all your plans, dreams, your perfectly arranged reality, can collapse in a single day. How you can lose your husband, your home, your job, your faith in people, and in that same day, gain back something you thought was gone forever. Dad was alive. That was the greatest miracle of all. He'd saved Matthew and me from certain death. He'd come back to us from the shadows. My own marriage may have turned to ashes, but my parents' family, broken 8 years ago, was slowly coming back to life, piece by piece. Matthew finally yawned, stretched his tiny hands, and drifted off to sleep, resting his little head against my chest. I gently carried him to his crib, covered him with the soft bunny blanket Mom had knitted, and stood watching him, peaceful, beautiful. My son. My purpose. My little miracle, unaware of what we'd survived, of the death that almost took us. He would grow up without a father, and that hurt, but he would have a loving mother, a caring grandmother, and a grandfather who had literally returned from the dead to protect his family. Life went on, different from what I'd imagined, without a husband, without my own home, without the steady rhythm of work, but still life. Real, breathing, full of hope. And in that new life, there was room for forgiveness. For Mom, who was learning to forgive Dad after 8 years of lies. There was room for new beginnings, as we learned to live again, rebuild, love again. I walked to the window, rested my forehead against the cold glass, and looked out at the snow-covered yard, the playground buried under white, the dark outlines of trees. Somewhere across the city, in a cold gray cell, sat the man I once loved with all my heart, waiting to be transferred to a prison where he'd spend the next 15 years of his life. And here I was, warm, safe, holding my son, with my parents beside me. Justice had prevailed. The guilty were punished. Life went on. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of the apartment, the soft breathing of Matthew in his crib, the low voices of my parents in the kitchen, the wind howling outside. The sounds of life, simple, human life, that I had almost lost that October day. Thank you, I thought. Thank you to the strange woman by the building, who turned out to be an undercover officer. Thank you to Dad, for watching over us all those years and saving us when it mattered most. Thank you to fate, for sending me that sign and making me listen. I've always believed in signs. My grandmother taught me that. Trust your intuition, listen to the quiet voice inside. Notice the warnings. And that day, I did. I called the number of my dead father. I walked away from the entrance. I didn't go inside the apartment. And that choice saved our lives. Maybe that's what destiny really is, a series of choices we make every second. To turn left or right, to listen or ignore, to believe or doubt. And sometimes, a single choice changes everything. I chose life. I chose to trust that strange woman. I chose to make that call. And because of that choice, I'm here now, standing by the window, alive and unharmed, with my son sleeping peacefully in his crib. From the kitchen came the soft sound of Mom's laughter, light, pure, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Then Dad's voice, saying something, and her laughter again. They were together. At last. After everything. I smiled, stepped away from the window, and pulled a warm blanket over my shoulders. Tomorrow would be a new day. The first day of the rest of my life. A life without illusions, without naivete, but with hope. With faith that things could still turn out all right. With gratitude for every single day, every breath, every smile of my son. I had survived. We had survived. And that was what truly mattered. Life went on, imperfect, complicated, sometimes cruel, yet still beautiful. Because I was alive. My son was alive. My father had come back. My mother was smiling again. And the future lay ahead, uncertain, frightening, but full of possibility. I lay down, pulled the blanket over myself, and turned on my side to face Matthew's crib. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in many weeks, felt something close to peace. Quiet, fragile, but real peace. Everything's going to be okay, I thought before falling asleep. It has to be. Because we're together. Because we're stronger than we think. Because life always gives a second chance to those who are ready to take it. And I was ready. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you new, captivating stories every day. You can already find our next story on the main page. We wish you all the best and happiness in your life.